Hey everybody, it's Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the PlayStation Theater, and today we are here with Sharon of Within Temptation.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and already not even 2 seconds and people are walking in.
Yeah, exactly. It's a chaos here.
Yeah. But your new album, Resist, is absolutely beautiful. What I was curious is, does Within Temptation, because I could tell as somebody who listens to you, what's off Mother Earth, what's off the heart of everything, so it's fair to say Within Temptation takes a new approach to every album, right?
We try to. We don't always succeed as much as we want to sometimes, but this album we definitely did a total change, I think.
Yeah.
Well, total change. Still, you have elements of Within Station in there that we had before, of course, because you never can change 100%. But it's more like we did use a lot of new elements in there that we never had before. Where in the past there were more or less always the same kind of elements, but you had different. We emphasized different things more at certain things. How do I explain this in the right way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, but this time we had different elements that we had never used before. That we had some urban influences, and that was something that's totally new for us.
Yeah. Now, I've always been a fan of your lyrics just as much as your voice, like in songs like The Final Destination and Memories and stuff. So what I was curious is, do you sometimes need to hear music to come up with lyrics, or do you sometimes have lyrics or a concept in mind and maybe the rest of the band writes according to that?
No, it's more for me that, well, I just start singing. That's basically how it happens. I'm just playing piano or guitar, and then I just start singing, and immediately I have a certain emotion to the music, and then lyrics come afterwards. And sometimes I think a lot of things are in your mind subconsciously, and I think these things always come up when I'm writing, and then afterwards I try to make a lyric out of it, and sometimes I have a subject up front, but a lot of times I don't, and then I do it afterwards. But a lot of basic words that are important for the eventual song are already in there. So it's like, which is necessary because it's very hard to change everything at the end. But first I write the melodies, and then the lyrics come. That's how it works for me mostly.
Awesome. Now, you've collaborated with a lot of different vocalists, like collaborating with Tarja,
Yeah.
who comes from a similar style, but you've also collaborated with Mina Caputo from Life of Agony, Howard Jones, Jacoby on the latest record.
Exhibits.
Yep. So with working with different artists, does that allow you to maybe expand on your vocal style at all, or does it teach you new things?
Well, why I asked them is because they add a color that I can't, or they have something specific that we need for the song. And we always look at the song like, okay, what do we need if we're going to do a duet, and what kind of ambience or what kind of what kind of color can we use for this song? And then you ask certain people who can do that. And so it was with Tarja was more the only exception. I think with Tarja was more because people always saw us like, how do you say it? Like that we had some kind of competition going on, which it never was. So we felt like, let's have this kind of. This song was about and the lyrics are about paradise, like in that. So it's like showing other people's like there's no competition between us. We just, we never actually met before we recorded the song actually. So it was like, of course, we knew each other by name and we knew the band, of course, and the music, but we never actually really met and had a nice conversation with each other. So that was the only exception. But for instance, Exhibit, that's of course a different world than where we're coming from. I can never do what he does, and so yeah, I learned from him a lot actually. Yeah.
And I'd imagine that, like the rest of the band, that allows the band to experiment with their sounds and their styles as well.
Of course,
right?
yeah. Everybody does their own solos and everything. They have their own interpretation of things. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was always curious about, because coming from the Netherlands, it's such a, Epica coming from there, and Sisters of Suffocation, so many great bands. So, was there a scene that Within Temptation kind of started in, or were you a band that kind of had to go outside the Netherlands to get your name out there?
No, I think our first steps were made actually in the Netherlands, but it was more like we came from, there was a band before Within Station called The Circle, and Robert and Martijn Spierenburg, the keyboard player, they started that band. and they kicked out Robert eventually. And he and I started William Station. But before William Station, there was already a band doing the same kind of thing. And Robert was coming from the death metal scene. That's what he liked. And so it was really, at that time that he came from that, it was the heaviest of heaviest kind of music that he listened to. And you saw a lot of bands starting to experiment with a lot of melody and stuff. And so he wanted to have the growling voices in the music. And they had this singer, a very young girl who sang one of the first songs on the album. And Martijn was more of the clarinet and Dead Can Dance kind of lover of music. So they had a combination that they already set like a style at the time. And when Robert left the band, we started William Station together. And well, the circle just died after that a little bit, unfortunately. But but we started William Station, and so we came from different. Everybody came from a different world because at the time the death metal scene was really big, but he really liked Marillion, and Iron Maiden kind of music. So he had a lot of things on that corner. He had Martijn, who was really more the Celtic and the orchestral kind of things that he liked doing. But he was not in the band until Mother Earth. No, after Mother Earth he came. Yeah, he came after Mother Earth. So when we wrote Mother Earth, Martijn Spierenburg came back to the band. We asked him back again, and But and for me it's the same thing. I also liked always the clarinet kind of thing. I never was into the death metal kind of music.
Really?
No, I was a grunge girl actually. Okay. So I've always liked that kind of music. So and Black Sabbath, because that's what I grew up with. My parents loved that, and but I'm just always I just love music in general. It doesn't have to be a certain genre, but I must say my heart and soul is in metal and rock music. I like that best.
That's really funny that you say that, because I know there's a lot of I don't know so much about Simone Simmons, but Tarja, for example, and a lot of artists from the symphonic realm of metal, like they're very classically trained. And I thought when the first album I heard was The Heart of Everything, and I was like, wow, you could sing like in Broadway or like an opera. So I was wondering how you guys kind of combine like a classical opera sound with metal.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't have any education at all in music, but I'm probably one of the few in the band, because the guys, they all did a special school for music. And but how we combine this is, I think, just putting people together with different backgrounds. I think what they listen to music-wise, I think.
Yeah.
Should we do that again?
No, it's fine. It makes it natural.
Okay. Well, it's more like, like I said before, like Robert coming from the metal scene and also having the symphonic things that he liked. Jeroen also liked Yes, for instance, and so a lot of symphonic prog stuff he liked. So if you put all these people together, how we started, everybody had different backgrounds of what they were listening to, and if you put it in a melting pot, you get William Station. But of course, it's certain things get emphasized and certain things don't get emphasized. But that's where we're coming from. We're coming from that kind of background.
Yeah. And it's noticed in your catalog too, because I think every album really stands out in its own
way. Yeah.
And the final question I'd like to ask you is Resist, because I really thought that this album actually had a lot of elements. I saw elements of Hydra on there, and stuff from Mother Earth on there, and so on. So was this record kind of meant to be like kind of combining everything you kind of done previously?
No, actually it doesn't. But I think you always take your past with you. Everything you've done, it will come more or less. You can't let that go. That's who you are, of course. But we tried very much to bring something new, actually, to our songwriting, and that's getting. We were very much influenced by a lot of urban stuff, actually, but so that makes this typical this album more. A little bit of a groovy album, which we have never been before. We've never been a groovy band, and we love to be groovy, but we never were. And it's the first album I can really say, it's like we have got a few groovy songs on. And so, but of course, you always combine what you are, of course. It's nice to take things outside of your scene and implement that in your music, but you always be William Station, that's who you are, that's in your genes, that's what you write, but you always it's nice to have new influences to spice things up and to yeah.
I've noticed many different vibes too on the album. Like there were songs that like I considered like almost like Queen level of victory anthems, and then there were songs that were very emotional and melancholy. Do you feel different emotions depending on like the songs that you've written and played?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, every song has a different meaning, of course, and it's. I think the whole palette comes. It passes on this album. It goes from left to right, but it's still there's a red line in the production. So that's the basic thing I think which is important.
It's open to interpretation, or you're trying to convey a certain message.
Well, we were inspired, of course, in a certain way about certain things. We just think we were living in a very crazy world, a mad world, actually, and in certain ways, of course. But it's like and that inspired us to write about. It's like politically, but also sometimes in a more personal way. So it has some personal songs on and some political kind of things on there. Yeah.
Yeah, I always said it was like, from listening to the lyrics, it was like using an external conflict to describe an internal conflict. That's what I said in the review.
Well, that's very beautiful. Like what he said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time.
You're
It's
most
going to be a
welcome.
great show tonight. Is there just anything else within Temptation we could be expecting on this brand new record cycle?
Well, let me think. Well, we just released a lot of our older albums on the vinyl finally, so maybe that's something that people don't know, and it's nice to know. But from the new album, we're going to do a lot of festivals, so we're going to be touring a lot still, and maybe also next year, maybe take some time off in the after the summer, and start writing again. We want to write a new album very quickly because we feel like we want to, and maybe just go in January next year to other countries outside of Europe again. Don't know where yet, so
Awesome.
yeah.
Well,
Welcome.
Sharon,
Thank you very
thank you
much.
so much. Everybody, Sharon of Within Temptation, pick up Resist if you haven't already. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone, we return with Sharon of Within Temptation. Good to talk to you again.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Yep, it's so awesome to have you here. The newest single that you released, Entertain You, is absolutely beautiful. Is this almost like maybe a representation of maybe what the next Within Temptation album is going to be like, or was this kind of just like a one-off thing?
Well, we don't know yet because we have only recorded 2 songs so far. We have a lot of demos that we still have to work out and to finish. But there was more like we want to have a few extra songs. This is one of them, to play at the tour that we're supposed to be doing. And besides at the festivals, but everything is postponed now, of course. So. But nevertheless, we decided to release it now because we felt like it's maybe a good time. Everybody's at home, and we need something new to look forward to.
Yeah, I gotta say also, with the times that we're currently living in, that the latest album, Resist, has a lot more context behind it. I feel like Resist almost predicted the future.
Well, I must say that it was also really I totally agree with you in a way. But of course, the pandemic wasn't in there yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that with the Resist, there was a lot of different emotions that was demonstrated on here. Like, I thought Endless War was very different from, like, Supernova, which is very different from, like, In Vain or something like that. Is it fair to say that, like, many emotions were felt during the making of this album?
Yeah, we were also coming back after quite a long time of not releasing any new stuff, and then of course you have a lot of mixed emotions that you still want to, relieve yourself from. So I think that probably was the reason why it was so diverse. It's also something we always try to make every song, of course, different from the other, but I think on this album you have more differences between the songs than probably on other albums where it was more one album that sounded more or less in the same kind of vibe, and this album is quite different with every song, I must say. Yeah, so I totally agree.
Yeah,
probably it was because of that.
Yeah, it's fair to say Resist wasn't just a direct follow-up to Hydra, right? Like, it was almost kind of like a new start for Within Temptation.
Yeah, we had a long break after Hydra, because of the fact that we didn't really know which direction to take the music, too. We always want to develop ourselves, meaning like we want to, challenge ourselves to make the best music that we can. And we felt like we were on a crossroad also a little bit, and also we didn't know which direction to take it musically. And the break was really a relief to us all, because it gave us time to think what we wanted to do with our lives, with the music, and especially also the music direction eventually when we started again.
Yeah, well, you've always for a while you've always taken like a long break between albums. Like I think it was like 4 or 5 years between The Heart of Everything and The Unforgiving as well, right?
Something like that. I think it was 4 years probably. I don't think it was 5 years. That's pretty long. But I think the biggest gap between albums was between The Heart of Everything, the Mother Earth album and The Silent Force, because of the fact that we were re-releasing our albums constantly. I think between the Heart of Everything and Unforgiving, it wasn't that long. I think it was max 4 years.
Yeah, something like that. Now, I mentioned...
Still a long time.
Yeah, still a very long time. You always keep it fresh. Every time Within Temptation releases a new album, it's always like an event for a lot of us, so...
Yeah, and a big shock for some of you as well.
Well, I mean, I mentioned it in the last time I spoke to you that, like, you know, as somebody who listens to Within Temptation, if you played me 30 seconds of a song, I could tell that's off The Silent Force or The Heart of Everything or Hydra or something like that. So you always like to experiment with your sound as much as possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we love doing. We like I said, we try to reinvent ourselves a little bit every time. Of course, you can't completely do something different, but that does keep it interesting for us.
Yeah. Was it always kind of like a preconceived idea of how you want a record to sound like, or do these changes or does this experimentation almost kind of come naturally?
These come very naturally. It's always like you want to live in the moment, and I think also it's a little bit like when you release an album. For us, it's like, how would the band sound in this year or in that year if we would have started, you know? So it's like really exactly like reinventing ourselves, because we really let the music come to us, and it's not like we have a plan up front how we want to sound. It's just going with the flow more or less.
Yeah, you mentioned capturing a moment, and I love asking this because you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, maybe the harder it is to sort of capture a moment in the song.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you find it harder? You mentioned like you're trying to capture a moment with your songs. Do you almost feel like the longer you work on something, the harder it is to sort of hold that moment or that emotion in a way?
Yeah, totally. Because the best thing is to finish a song in the moment, and when you take longer for it, sometimes you forget what the emotion was, and sometimes also you lose the magic when you start recording stuff, and that's something that's a little bit you kill your darling time while recording your new songs. But to do it as fast as possible, especially now, what we've done, it was kept as closest to the demo than we ever been, and that's always the magic. The magic's always the demo somehow.
Yeah, I think it's because maybe the demo's always like the most raw version of who you are, so there's like really nothing to hide on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it is the most honest first way of what comes out of you, and I think that's the closest you can get with a demo. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask this. We'll just get this over with now. But being that Mother Earth is 20 years old this year, were we planning on maybe doing like a celebration of that in a way?
Not really, because we had so many other stuff planned. You know, the tour going. We have this tour with Evanescence, the Worlds Collide tour, and a lot of festivals. So our year was pretty much fully booked, and didn't think about the Mother Earth album that much. But it is something that you could do something with in the future, and maybe at the end of your career that you think like maybe we'll do a tour of every album. I don't know, something like that. Or but at this moment we're still we're so much enjoying the new music that we're making, and we're still a band. Although we've been around for such a long time, we still want to look ahead and instead of looking back.
Yeah, that's fair to say. But, I feel like Ice Queen and Our Farewell and Dark Wings are always timeless. And, from talking to the fans outside PlayStation Theater when you played there last year, I was like, what do you want to hear? And I kept hearing people mention, deep cuts and all that stuff.
yeah, but I think also what happens with fans a lot of times, yeah, it's all, of course, it's what you say, that certain songs are timeless, but I also think that we also identify ourselves a lot to certain songs, and with other songs you have just a different moment in time in your own life, and maybe you connect not as much to it because the lyrics don't appeal to you, or the certain sound it has is too different than you were hoping for. And music is always so much attached to emotions and the period of your life. So I think that's mostly the reason why people are very nostalgic about certain songs often.
Definitely. And
My humble opinion.
that kind of led me into my next question, because when you look at, like, when you compare like Mother Earth to the Silent Force, going up to, modern day with Resist, is it almost kind of like a reflection on who you and the rest of the band were at that particular time? Do you almost kind of look at these albums like as a self-portrait in a way?
Yeah, very much. It's exactly what you're saying. And that's also what we try to capture the moment of the time that we're living in. And it's a representation of who we are as a band in that moment of time and how we would like to sound like. And that changes with every few years because everything around us changes as well. Our influences change, technology changes. So everything is moving, and we don't want to stand still like where we started like almost 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's totally understandable. And like when it comes to like getting inspired to write music or lyrics, I remember you said last year you like need the music before you start writing lyrics. But like I feel like your music has so much subject matter, because I feel like Resist or a song like Our Solemn Hour off the Heart of Everything had kind of like a political context behind it. But then there are songs that I feel like are very, very personal. Like, do you look for inspiration for lyrics, or do ideas just come naturally after you hear the music?
No, most of the time they come naturally, and sometimes I already have a subject in mind where I want to talk about. But a lot of these things are connected to each other because without knowing it, there's a lot of things going on in your mind. And when you're starting to make music, you have to really open up. And eventually, these topics that are really inside of your mind constantly, where you're thinking about, which you're worried about, which you're angry about, or which your melancholy is about, it all comes back to the music you're making at that point of time. And with Resist especially, I was really, really concerned about all the things happening in our world. I still am. But with Entertain You was a different subject, and more that also has to do with our society, but in a different way, not political in this way. You could see it also political, but I didn't mean it as a political song. And so we are inspired a lot about things that are affecting our personal life, but also globally.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it last year that I felt like Resist was almost kind of like taking like a revolution or a war or something like that, and showing that it's like not very different from like the turmoil that we could feel inside. I don't know if that was the subject matter of Resist, or if I was just overthinking the hell out of it.
No, you're very correct. You're spot on.
Awesome.
I was. There were a lot of political things happening, and still are. That hasn't changed, and that I'm surprised about that things are happening in our world. And I think, like, oh my God, we're almost thrown into the Stone Age again, and we're trying to control each other. And a lot of things happening in the world that I'm still concerned about, and we all addressed that on the previous album, Resist.
Yeah, well, because I thought Resist was also kind of like your more experimental album. Like, I thought I saw elements from The Heart of Everything on there, but I saw elements from Hydra. I thought like the keyboards to Supernova were very like futuristic sounding. Does almost kind of like the sound of Within Temptation also represent who you are, as well as the lyrics in a way?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's all the combination of everything that makes you who you are and how people will look at you, of course. Yeah.
One thing I was also really curious about is between Within Temptation and My Indigo, is it almost kind of like a different side of who you are personally? Like, is it a different mind frame and songwriting process, or is there kind of like a usual method behind the madness that applies to everything?
No, I think it's a different part of me that I couldn't give. Certain emotions I couldn't place in Within Temptation because they're too, maybe in a different feeling, and it would have been I needed this kind of music to reflect my emotions. And so when I gave that a face and a place, I could go on with Invitation again. I just needed to park it somewhere, and it was called My Indigo. And I couldn't translate my emotions for With Invitation to With Invitation songs, which needed a different kind of, always needs a different kind of approach.
Really? So it's not like maybe experimenting with My Indigo maybe brought in some new ideas on what you could bring to Within Temptation? You try to keep it as separate as possible?
No, of course, these things always influence each other, but they're very different from each other. But, the way of production, for instance, My Indigo was really a big help for Resist. And it was like different uses of instruments and stuff like that, and how we looked at songwriting also. So it helped us really to get to the Resist album to transform a little bit more into this new sound. It was really necessary to get there for With Invitation with the Resist album.
Yeah, that's very interesting to see. And on top of that, I mentioned last time we spoke a lot of artists coming into Within Temptation, like Jacoby collaborating on Resist, and having Mina Caputo from Life of Agony and stuff. But you've also collaborated with a lot of artists as well, such as Avantasia, and just recently with Saint Asonia as well. Like, I'd imagine that collaborating with different artists also allows you to bring in some newer stuff to Within Temptation as well, right?
Well, I especially learn from them also. I bring myself always to this process, but I learn from their songwriting and how they do stuff. That's also interesting for me always. Since it's a combination. Probably you influence each other also a bit. So it's always a win-win situation, how we say in Holland.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And like when you collaborate with somebody, do you almost kind of have to maybe adjust your vocal style to like kind of fit their music in a way, or do they just want you to completely bring in your own personality?
Most of the times they already check, of course, if it's within my vocal range, and that's also what we do with other artists. Otherwise, it's for both vocalists who will sing together eventually very difficult if you're in a more difficult range of your vocal range. So it's something that you have to look at before you approach someone. It's like, okay, what kind of vocal range does this person have? You're checking it on different songs, and then you think, okay, I love his voice, and it will be within the vocal range that we can meet each other. So then, we can find each other, and then you ask someone to come and sing, because it's very frustrating for everyone if it doesn't work out in a certain way, or one of the two sounds less than the other, or how you could sound in your normal tonality.
Mm-hmm, of course. And I have a couple more questions for you. You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Oh my God. Yeah, come on, bring it on.
How do you know, this could go for any project you're involved in, how do you know when a song is done?
When a song is done, well, that's what a painting and everything else which is creative. You don't. You hope in the moment it's done, but also when you look back at it, there's always songs in the end that you think, okay, you might make it a different kind of sounding song if you would re-record the same songs 10 years later or 5 years later, sometimes 2 years later, depending on what kind of revolutionary things have happened in the music and in production and stuff like that. But on the other hand, most of the times, which are especially the moments when you think, okay, when you already think in the beginning something's wrong, eventually you'll be bothered by it years after that. So you always have to listen to your inner person, like, okay, this is not feeling good, then you immediately have to act on it. Otherwise you will be bothered by it. I had one, we have this song on Mother Earth called Dark Wings, and not Dark Wings, it's oh god, what is going let me think, sorry, so many songs. It's a slow song, a single also.
Imperfect Harmony?
Imperfect, not Imperfect, another one.
The Promise?
Oh god, no, it's not a ballad. There's a guitar solo in it, and I hate it. I hated it then, and I still hate it.
Maybe it's best if you don't mention the song then.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't say it. Yeah, there is a song cut. There is a song where there's this guitar solo, and I've always hated that guitar solo, and I still hate it because it's not what I wanted for the song. But sometimes it gets in there, and because of time pressure, it's like, yeah, there's no time anymore. I can't do it. Redo it or something like that, and that's something I'm really still when I play the song I'm still sorry for.
How would you feel if that song ended up being the biggest hit you've ever had?
Horrible. Luckily it didn't. Or maybe because of it didn't become our biggest song.
I'm gonna listen to the entirety of Mother Earth now, just for at least it wasn't Ice Queen that you were talking about.
No, it wasn't Ice Cream. No, luckily not. No.
Yeah.
I would have said something if it would have been Ice Cream, of course.
Yeah. And I have 2 more questions for you, but when it comes to playing live, the show that you did in New York City last year was actually my first time ever seeing Within Temptation, and it was a completely different experience than simply listening to you. So when it comes to like playing live, is there maybe a similar creative energy into playing live as you are when you're songwriting, or is playing live and songwriting a completely separate art altogether?
Oh, that's a good question. Never had this one before. I really have to think about it. Well, there is some similarities to it. It's the same kind of energy you do get while you're doing it. It's the enthusiasm when you have written a new song, when you just feel like, okay, this is really something. We have here something that's really cool to write when you're writing. And you have the same feeling when you're on stage and you get the interaction with fans, and that is a similar kind of feeling. Yeah, I do agree with that. I do think there's a similarity to it. It's a different experience while you do, because when you're writing, you're just with it's a very intimate kind of experience, and when you're on stage, of course, it's more with everyone, but still you're in the center of it. So it has some similarities to the intenseness of being involved with creating music, but the surroundings are very different, of course, but it has some similarities, yes.
Yeah, definitely. And because you've also played with like a variety of different bands too. Like playing with Evanescence, I feel like is almost like a match made in heaven. But like last year you brought out In Flames, and I remember watching the whole audience like kill each other in the mosh pit, and then like and then that same audience, when you would play like a ballad, they were all holding up lighters and crying, which I thought was incredible. I've never seen so much contrast in a concert before.
Well, I must say I was a little bit afraid of that. In the beginning, it's like, okay, we like them very much, and we have we went on tour, and it was also an experiment for both of us, I guess, because it was the first time that we ever actually met, and so it's also always waiting for what kind of atmosphere will there be eventually, and with fans also, because the bands are very different from each other, of course, but it was a strange combination. I saw people pogoing and mosh pitting, and we don't have that many mosh pits but the last album, also on festivals, all of a sudden people start mosh pitting. I don't know why, but it's a cool sight though. but in the past we weren't the kind of band that people would do a mosh pit on. But and seeing this come together for the first time actually in America, I was like, okay, maybe it's because of them, but it was actually also happening after that. But on festivals more. But especially to songs of Resist, which does bring out a different kind of emotion probably. So it has, I was really surprised about it.
Yeah, I saw a mosh pit at the last Lacuna Coil show I saw, and it was to their slowest songs. So at this point, I think people...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a trend, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what the kids are doing nowadays.
Yeah.
Yep. And before we go, just finally, first I want to thank you so much for your time. It's so great to talk to you again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there just anything that you would like to promote? Obviously, thanks to a virus that shall not be named, I don't want to give it any promotion.
No, I totally agree.
Yep.
Neither to the beer.
Yep. But is there just anything, like, obviously, there are tours that are getting canceled now and everything like that. Is there any way that fans can support you, or is there just anything else Within Temptation you'd like to promote aside from the new single?
Well, I think if you want to promote if you want to help, not only just the bands but also the industry, is especially when you have bought a ticket. Of course, we are not going to America at this point, and we didn't sell any tickets for our shows. But the best way to support the whole music industry is by, especially when you bought a ticket, if you're able to hold on to the ticket and not return it. That's the best way to support not just the bands but also the crew members and everyone else. And besides it, of course, playing it on the platforms, the streaming platforms, and the merchandise, of course. So those kind of things always will help. But I think if you want to help everyone in the complete situation in the biggest way, it's probably to hold on to tickets.
Yeah, you have a very, very dedicated fan base, so I doubt any of them are going to return their tickets. So.
No, I hope so. Yeah, I know they're very dedicated. That's true. You're totally right.
Yeah, like I was at the show last year. My job as a journalist is to be a pain in the ass and interrupt everybody's discussion to ask them, what the band did for them, and the stories I heard about you guys and how your music has helped them is truly left an impact on me. So I just.
Oh wow.
So.
Well, that's. I think that's the most beautiful thing that you have as a journalist, that you can really peek inside everyone. You have like a paper in your hand, like, okay, I can ask you any question. So yeah, that must be a really, really nice way to experience maybe also shows in general of bands in a different way, that you get a little bit peek of people's personal lives. Like, I'm a journalist, can you tell me a little bit about, and then people just open up to you.
Yeah, I love interviewing the fans as much as I love interviewing the bands, so.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, and good luck, and take care.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody, we are here with Sharon of Within Temptation. Be sure to check out the new single, Entertain You, and pick up Resist if you haven't already. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.